I see Australia's multiculturalism as one of the great victories, or one of the great, success stories in Australia. And I'm not ashamed of the word multiculturalism. I think it's a good word, and I think it's really disappointing that the Liberal government have decided to sort of erase it from the books. Multiculturalism in Australia has been a success, and Australia has benefited greatly from it. And I think we should encourage it, not just the refugees, but normal migration. But especially now, when we've got the situation of global warming, we should be very much aware of people who are becoming refugees because their lands are being inundated by the sea. I was really disappointed recently when the islanders of Tuvalu, who are losing, and Kiribati, who are losing their islands, partly because of the emissions that Australia is pumping into the atmosphere and causing global warming. They came to the minister at the time, who was Ruddock, and asked, well, could we have asylum in your country? And he said a flat no. So then they went to our neighbours New Zealand, who graciously and with some sense of justice did in fact agree to a plan to resettle them in New Zealand, I think a quota of about 70 a year or something. And I was thinking, well, thank goodness that at least somebody is doing their bit. So, I mean, I live in Bennelong, of course, is a very multicultural suburb, and it's great. Just from personal experience, I know this was going to sound terribly patronising, but, I love being in a multicultural area. The Korean, or people with a Korean and Chinese background, they are really nice people, quite apart from the fantastically wonderful food and restaurants down there. But they're very pleasant, really, and some of my best friends are from Vietnamese background that I've known for many, many years. So, and I know that does sound very patronising, but, I love living in a multicultural society. There is this fear that if we open up our borders, there's going to be a flood of migration from other countries. I think that's a beat up, actually. I don't think that's actually going to happen. I don't think it's ever happened. People don't normally want to leave their countries if they are living in have a decent way of life in those countries. People leave their countries if they are forced to by extremes of injustices or extreme famine or some civil war and so on. So the Greens policy is to try and have to assist countries, to lift our foreign aid to 7%, which we have agreed to do, but of course hardly any countries in the world have done that, and to try and target our aid not as defence and not as aid with one sort of giving with one hand and taking with the other, but in trying to have a very positive effect, not just a military presence in countries, but trying to have a positive and cooperative relationships with our neighbours. We're not going to get a flood. We should be taking refugees, people who most of the people who come as refugees and we lock them up behind barbed wire, most of them, in fact, after many terrible, terrible years behind these camps and in these camps, turn out to be genuine refugees anyhow. So this idea is a real beat-up of especially of the neoliberals, and it's based on this, again, almost this white supremacy idea, or a very narrow idea of the sort of country they see Australia as, somehow as still very much tied to our English history, or now to our US connections. I see Australia as a multicultural society. I think we have to work out our identity with all the peoples in our region and also with our Indigenous population. And I don't think we're ever going to get a real, genuine sense of national identity until it encompasses our Aboriginal people. We have to look at that squarely, address that issue, and come to some sort of treaty and understanding and respect of that culture which we have destroyed, a culture that's lasted 30,000 years. And similarly, we have to look at our neighbours not as threats, but as partners, in the world going forward.